The Outsider podcast shares the opinions and analyses of Drew Landry. They are his thoughts, and his thoughts alone, and do not necessarily reflect every member of his audience or newsletter readers. Now, on with the show.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Outsider Podcast. I'm your host as always, Drew Landry. And folks, thank you so much for making this the best politics podcast west of I-35 in the Lone Star State. So however, whenever, and wherever you are listening or watching, please know that I am incredibly grateful for your attention. In today's episode, I only have a few items for you. There's no trot around the bases for this week, but I will get to a few topics that deserve more attention than it really gets here for this past week. And the first that I really wanted to dive into is the battle over gerrymandering, okay? If you're an active subscriber to the newsletter, you know that I talk a lot about gerrymandering, and I've went on to actually define what this is. Let's understand a key concept of gerrymandering, folks. It's to manipulate and it's to dilute influence of a particular group within a district. So, both parties do it. Long history of this. I don't need to get into the finer details of all that. But there's one big thing that happened just a couple of weeks ago, done by the U.S. Supreme Court, and it was Section 2 of the voting rights was incredibly weakened, and it really, it no longer mandated a majority-minority district that would ensure fair representation. It also raised the bar to argue about racial gerrymandering, okay? So it's no longer about result. Now you have to show intent. And you notice something here where a lot of these Republican states, really from the southern areas of the U.S., are racing to gerrymander. The governors are now calling in special sessions, wanting to, their state legislatures to redistrict is what they want to call it, but it's more along the lines of, let's just be honest, it's gerrymandering. No ands, if, or buts about it. It happened in Tennessee. All right, as the volunteer state's legislature cracked, or that's one of the ways that gerrymandering happens here is through what's known as cracking, or you divide, all right, where that legislature in Tennessee cracked the one majority black district, and that was in the city known as the Music City. It's called Memphis. Maybe you've heard of it. South Carolina is now going after longtime Congressman Jim Clyburn. And then, we have the Bayou state of Louisiana. It's shrinking its black representation through more gerrymandering. So we're seeing this really play out here because of the domino that was kicked by Texas. I mean, we're the ones who started this whole thing here. Let's also know that people who are observing this have said that this is mainly gone for the Republicans. All right. I mean, let's understand that it was last week where the Virginia State Supreme Court ruled that map, that gerrymandered map that was done by the party in power, which was the Democrats. All right. Virginians actually got to vote on that. All right. So the Democrats in Virginia redrew this map. All right. And done by the state constitution, they had to actually vote on it to approve it. Virginians approved it. It wasn't exactly a great, wide sweeping win. It was a win nonetheless, but they voted on it. They voted on it. A little bit of a tongue twister there. But the Virginia State Supreme Court ruled that map unconstitutional due to the process. That this was being brought up during early voting and people didn't know. I mean, it's just the dumbest thing around. Of course, people from the cheap seats, including myself, I'll throw myself in there, um, not just here in Texas, but across the country, think this could possibly benefit the Republicans in the upcoming midterm. And look, maybe. I don't find myself agreeing a lot with Karl Rove, but the Republican operative Karl Rove actually thinks this is a bad idea. And he has argued that this could dilute Republican voters because you're putting Republican voters in Democratic districts to outnumber the Democrats. And he thinks that doing that is going to harm the Republicans in the end. And he makes a really good argument to say that things don't go as well as you think they will when it comes to politics. It doesn't always end the way that you think. And then we even heard, here's another big thing here, that maybe this whole redistricting thing, this gerrymandering fight, won't help the Republicans, that there are some Texas Republicans who feel disillusioned and just flat out disconnected and may not even vote in the upcoming election. And so that is leaving some idea that perhaps Democrats could pounce on that. Look, I'm not holding my breath on that. I'll believe it when I see it. That's all of these sort of prognostications and projections are being done in the spring. All right, we have to remember, as it always does, public opinion changes. All right, people's attitudes will change as we get closer to the election. So if you're out here, casting, spells on people here in May about voting, all right. Well, I know they're not going to vote. Well, I know that they will vote. I mean, it's folly. But we can only tell where people are now, and so there's the idea that Texas Republicans are feeling a little disillusioned by the choices that they have, especially for U.S. Senate, and perhaps that may not go as well for them. Again, I'll believe it when I see it. But let's be clear about what the point that I'm bringing out here. The point that I'm making is you want to be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. And it may not go as you think it will. And why would I say that? Well, look, I mean, you just look at the president's approval numbers. They're in the tank. They're awful. Real Clear Politics is average. Bad. Cook Political Reports average. Bad. The New York Times is average. Bad. All of them have a competing have all of these outlets have the same result here. They have the same story. The president is not popular. He is incredibly unpopular. And why do they matter? Well, they matter because history has shown us, and it leaves us a pretty good way to think, all right, based on history, that voters in a midterm election will punish the party of the president. And I'm of the mindset that attempts to rig this whole thing through gerrymandering isn't really going to matter all that much. Again, and that's the point that I'm making here. So while they're trying to do all this gerrymandering to try to shore up the House of Representatives so that Republicans gain instead of lose, I don't think that's really going to matter. Again, I'm saying this in May. All right, as we get closer to the election here in the next 4.5, 5 months, we'll have a much clearer picture as to what could possibly happen. But we kind of see where things are as we go along here. And where it's right now is it's not looking too good for the Republicans because of President Trump's approval numbers. All right. Even whenever we look at where, just a plain generic poll between any Republican versus any Democrat, the Democrat is usually coming out on top on this. So even by that measure, you're having some idea that perhaps Democrats could could do better than the Republicans, regardless of the gerrymandering taking place. All right. That is one thing I wanted to get with you. Another one here is a small point that I got to get this off my shoulders. All right. Vermont senator, and he doesn't claim to be part of a party. He's an independent. All right, claims to be a democratic socialist. Bernie Sanders, now the senior senator from Vermont, has been confirmed to be a keynote speaker at the Texas Democratic Party's convention down in Corpus Christi this summer. And the second I found out about that, I just rolled my eyes. I said, "You got to be kidding me. Give me a break." I can respect the work that someone does, not really like the person or his followers. And that's kind of how I feel about Bernie Sanders. I respect the work that he does and the things that he has said. Fine. But I don't know if I've ever seen a more toxic set of followers inside the Democratic circles than Bernie Sanders. All right? Senator Sanders speaks populism. And look, populism is all fine and good. All right? There's a reason it's called populism. People like it. But I'm just thinking, this jerk, here's why I say that. He would openly embrace not being a Democrat, except when he ran for president. When he ran for president in 16 and in 20, he was asked this question. You don't have a party. What are you doing here? And he would say, well, I want the Democratic nomination. He'd say, well, if I'm going to be part of the party, I kind of have to, if I'm seeking a party's nomination, I kind of have to be part of the party, right? That's the most non-answer answer that any politician could really give here. But let's understand he's gone out of his way not to be one. After 2016, after 2020, he could have said, okay, I'm no longer going to be independent. I'm going to join the Democrats. He didn't do that. But now the Texas Democratic Party wants someone who openly and proudly rejects being a member of that party to keynote at the convention? What? Could they not find any Democrats to really do this? If you don't want to invite a Democrat to speak at the Democratic convention, then why not invite someone like, I don't know, Jesse Ventura? He was an elected official. Goodness gracious, this is so dumb. I really hope delegates walk out of the room whenever he starts to really speak here. They just up and leave. This is just so frustrating on so many levels. But hey, it's not my thing. And I'm not even going to go because I teach during the summer. So I'm not going to take time off to go spend time in Corpus Christi that's going through a water crisis right now to try to hang out with Bernie. So no thanks. The last thing I wanted to really spend some time on here is something that I have had to look into. And I've had to really spend time digging, and that's on data centers and its effect that they have on rural areas. And so, I'm old enough to remember like the heyday of the TV show called The Simpsons. The animated show. Episodes that entailed Bart's rivalry with Sideshow Bob and the shooting of Mr. Burns. It's kind of like, who shot JR? It was who shot Mr. Burns. And even had celebrity appearances from George Harrison. He showed up there, and even Bret Hart showed up on there. But there's one episode that is more relevant than ever. And it was a 1993 installment called Marge versus the Monorail. Right? Marge versus the Monorail. And in this episode, the people of Springfield are sold about the wonders of a monorail. By this, they're sold by this out-of-towner, a salesman known as Lyle Lanley. And Marge Simpson believes the city should spend some money, all right, that it was given because of some instance with Mr. Burns, and, anyway, that they should spend this newly found money on fixing Main Street because it's in shambles and it's just, people are having a tough time even, driving on it. They're getting flat tires, people falling into it. And so she's like, spend the money on that. But she's drowned out by the crowd who are in favor of Lanley's proposition. Okay. Marge figures something is really afoot when her husband Homer, he's a genius. He became a monorail conductor. And he opened the fire extinguisher trap to find a family of opossums instead of a fire extinguisher. He says, I called the big one Bitey. So Marge then goes to one of those previous cities that adopted Lanley's monorail idea to find that city was desolated. Absolutely like a ghost town. She spoke to a citizen there who worked for Lanley and was informed that the monorail was built in that city was a scam. And this was the citizen, his name was Sebastian Cobb, who told Marge he was forced to cut corners whenever possible, using cheap building material and bad wiring and faulty brakes and whatever would be like not very cost efficient. Make it as minimal as possible so that the profit would not be eaten up by the cost, and it would be at the profit for Mr. Lanley. Let me get his name right. All the while, the city would be left with a useless machine. Okay, and you're saying, okay, I may have seen that episode. I vaguely remember it. What's the big deal? Why is this thing from over 30 years ago somehow now important? Well, it fits exactly with the pressure many cities are facing with these AI data centers. There's an ad from this group called Texas Connects, and it appears like, I don't know, maybe 100 times a day on my Hulu, okay? And this ad is selling the viewer that data centers are necessary for our paychecks, for hospitals, national security. It argues that data centers will support high-paying jobs and pay billions in taxes, and all the while using less than 1% of water and lowering your energy cost. I mean, this is just, just wow, Almost like if you scratch off this ticket and it has $1 million on it, you just won $1 million. If it sounds too good to be true, it is. And so if there was ever a project to get any sort of elected official's attention, you tell them how little it'll cost and how large the benefit will be. And that's the pitch that all these data centers and this data center movement are making. And the sale is, as the sale is carefully examined, as you actually look into it, the whole truth is conveniently omitted in all of this. These centers will bring jobs. Yeah, sure. Because data centers have to be built. So obviously there's going to be some sort of building jobs there in construction. That's actually going to happen. That's quite obvious. And that could take some time. And in some places that could take up to 3 years, depending how big the data center is. There's some that could argue that could take 5 years. But if we look at the data center that's being built and is supposed to be operational here in the next year in Abernathy, straight north of Lubbock, Abernathy, Texas. Half of it's in Lubbock County. The other half is in Hale County. That job length has a projection for several years, and it's supposed to be 313 acres that will be fully constructed. Okay? And that can take a while. So that is bringing about a construction job. No question about it. But my question is this. Then what? The data center itself may employ, 30 people. And there was a study that was done by the Virginia Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission that suggested that data centers employ the fewest employees than some other industries. And about half are actually contracted workers. So would those be high-paying jobs and in a competitive market? Yeah, maybe. But the most significant employment benefit is gained through the building of it all, not the data center itself. So we have that to take into effect. Another big issue is the tax revenue. The pitch is that these data centers will bring so much money to cities and counties through property taxes. And maybe at some point, if they're still around, these centers are choosing Texas due to a chapter in the tax code known as Chapter 312, which is a 10-year property tax abatement. So that means Project Caprock up in Abernathy, or Oracle's work with Stargate in Abilene, will not pay up to 90% of property taxes for 10 years. And they also get to exploit a 13-year-old law that exempts them from paying sales tax on their accessories. So things that they buy are tax exempt. And that leaves the state out of potentially $3.2 billion worth of revenue, as that was reported by the Texas Tribune. So here's the other catch. Like any other business, these data centers can challenge their property tax value. So while Oracle received an 85% property tax abatement, the company still challenged its county property value down there in Taylor County. You're getting the gigantic gift, and you're saying, "Oh, this is an okay prize. This is okay." So if these companies can get sweetheart deals to build and pay little to no property taxes for 10 years, all the while paying nothing in sales taxes, what revenue are they bringing? I would like to know that. What revenue exactly are they bringing in? And do we really think they'll stick around for year 11? That Chapter 312 is for the first 10 years. And we're supposed to think that they're going to stick around for a long time. It's just that the first 10 years they pay next to nothing in property taxes. Year 11 is when all that's supposed to really kick in. You really think they're going to be around for then? I believe it when I see it. Okay, now let's get into this water usage, because there's this whole conversation about how little water that these data centers use. And why would they need to use water? Because the servers get really hot, and so you have to cool them down. The argument is that they recycle the water or use a closed-loop cooling system. Therefore, you don't have to use a whole lot of water. That's a laugh. Feel free to laugh at that. Recycling water still uses water, just not from the same source. Okay, the water is still lost to evaporation, so you still got to use water. The closed-loop system is not the dominant method for large-scale data centers, and it will use heat to evaporate the water. So while the closed-loop system seems great, it will still use a lot of water. It will still impact the Ogallala Aquifer. and will still strain the municipal supply. So it uses a lot more water than what they really want you to think. And then we hear about it's going to lower your energy costs. Going to lower your energy costs. Again, what an eye-rolling laugh. There's just so many evidence, so much evidence you can just say, yeah, right. If anything, what's going to happen is that it's going to skyrocket our energy costs due to grid upgrades, massive megawatt usage, and the big congestion charges that will increase peak demand. So, no, it's not going to lower energy costs. If anyone believes that, I have oceanfront property to sell you off Indiana Avenue here in Lubbock. So just let me get this straight. Data centers will not lower our energy costs, will harm our water supply, might bring about gainful employment, and they won't pay their fair share in taxes. Trying to think here, why is this a good thing? I mean, this is a bad deal all around for a Cold War mindset. Because when you think about the whole argument about AI and why we need them, it's all about national security. If China has AI data centers, then the U.S. has to have them. And if Russia has it, then the U.S. has to have them. This is the most, I thought the Cold War was over. I thought the president and his whole mentality of foreign relations was, 3 different spheres. Russia will take care of Europe, Asia, China will take care of Asia, and then the U.S. will take care of the Americas. I guess it's not always the case there. I mean, that's such a pre-World War II mindset. And now we're getting into a Cold War mindset. This is just a bad deal with that sort of mindset. Companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, OpenAI, NVIDIA, the list goes on and on and on. They sell all those things that I just told you about, all the things that I just went through, to these cities, to these counties, and their elected officials, like Lyle Lanley, sold the monorail to Springfield. And they're going to be, they're going to want to be like Lyle Lanley. Take the money and run. That's why it's up to all of us to be like Marge Simpson and fight back. We can't allow these things to run our entire area. There was the whole conversation about Lubbock getting some 930-acre building. Like, you kidding me? If we have the ability for that, then it seems to me that we have the money for pools, or we can build a baseball stadium that's going to add way more revenue and be way more productive to the city, to the area. Be incredibly more helpful to citizens and residents around here than any data center. This is ridiculous. So that's something that I've looked into, been thinking about, and I wanted to share some thoughts with you on that. And I appreciate you hearing me out because, folks, that's all from me today. I appreciate you listening and watching to the Outsider Podcast. And I just want to say one thing here. If you, or even someone you know, or someone you have some sort of a 6 degrees of separation from, would like to be a guest on here, would like to come on this show, shoot me an email. Would love to talk to them. Would love to have that conversation. Email is drew.landry9@gmail.com. You can see it right below here. Right there. Yep. And, friends, look, I'll talk to anybody. I don't care. If you have a talking dog, let's get Lassie on the show. Okay? But for real, I have an open microphone policy. We can make it happen. So just shoot me that email, and we'll get the wheels in motion. But until then, until next week anyway, I appreciate you listening, watching. All right, and I'll see you again very, very soon.
The preceding analyses and opinions were that of Drew Landry and his alone. They did not necessarily reflect all of his podcast listeners or newsletter readers. Thank you for listening to the Outsider Podcast. Be sure to follow The Outsider on X and on Facebook. Also, don't forget to sign up to be a free subscriber to his newsletter on Substack. Just look for The Outsider. We will see you again next time.